Is a leading company in the comic industry. Characters like Captain America, the Hulk, Spider-Man, the X-Men, and Iron Man are just a few of the well-known characters created by Marvel. Marvel has always been centered in New York City. It was born in the city, and many of the comics created by Marvel are set in New York. Marvel Comics was founded in 1939 under the name Timely Publications. Timely's first publication was Marvel Comic No. 1, featuring the Human Torch and the Submariner. The young Stanley Lieber was hired in 1939. Lieber, by then writing with a pen name Stan Lee, became editor in 1941. Lee kept this position for decades and wrote extensively for Timely, contributing to a number of different titles. Under his governance, Marvel reached iconic proportions. Timely evolved into Atlas Comics after World War II, when superheroes were starting to go out of fashion. Atlas expanded into more genres such as horror, western, humor, crime, and war comics. Years later, Atlas once again changed its name.
I'm the guy who sort of started the whole thing. I even gave the company its name. It had been called Atlas Comics for a long time, and then when we started with the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and all of those characters, and I knew that people seemed to enjoy them, and we were getting a lot of fan mail, I thought we ought to change the name of the company. I decided to call it Marvel.
The time period that followed World War II was called the Golden Age of Comics because of the large number of successful new comics. Marvel began publishing superhero titles featuring such heroes as the Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, the X-Men, and Daredevil, and such memorable villains as Dr. Doom, Magneto, Galactus, the Green Goblin, and Dr. Octopus. The most successful new series was The Amazing Spider-Man, which was authored by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. While new characters came about, Marvel continued to improve the composition process of making the comic book.
We worked as a team. And I would write a story, I'd give it to an artist, he would illustrate it. A letterer would letter it, a colorist would color it.
What basically happens is that I come up with story ideas, usually in arcs ranging anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and I go to the editor and say, this is what I would like to do with, over the next 6 issues. And the editor will essentially vet them, as it were. He will make sure that there's no contradictions, so that the editor will say, hey, you know how you want to have Captain America guest star 4 months from now? You can't, he's going to be dead. That kind of thing. And once the editor signs off on it, then I just write this. I write each installment. I write what's called full script, which is from soup to nuts. I write everything that's going to be in the book. I say panel 1, and I describe what's in the panel, and then I put the dialogue, and all of this then goes to the artist who visually depicts the story that I have written down in the script.
An important component of the writing process in Marvel is the Marvel style of storytelling.
Marvel style of storytelling. Where that developed from was that this is back when Stan Lee was pretty much writing 1,800 Marvel comics in any given month, and Stan did not have the time to sit down and write a script. So what would happen is that Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko or one of the greats like that would come into the office, and Stan would say, okay, Jack, in this issue, Dr. Doom comes back, and he wreaks havoc with this machine that causes the Fantastic Four to lose their powers. And Jack would go, okay, and he would come back 4 weeks later with 22 pages of greatness.
Through all time, New York City has maintained its importance to the Marvel Universe.
Stan Lee, when Marvel was originally called Timely Comics, Timely was located in Manhattan, and then when he changed it to Marvel, it was still in Manhattan. So I think since he was the primary writer of Marvel, he just looked up and said, oh, Spider-Man's up there. And then we'll have Punisher over there shooting at him, and then Daredevil will be jumping around trying to stop him. So, but no, it's just the central. It's where everything's happening. It's one of the most highly populated places in the entire world. And it's an exciting place.
Marvel is in New York, and so people can, embrace that instead of like some other publishers. They make up new places, and then it's not so much where you can really connect with it. Where in New York, you're like, hey, I know Hell's Kitchen, I know Midtown, and then it's like, it's great. Like these characters are just like you and me.
Marvel Comics also has a vision for the future, which is already being embraced today. Online digital comic books, or e-comics, have become increasingly popular among comic fans. With this new medium, new challenges are presented. Digital representations are much easier to pirate, much like digital music files. However, there are different perspectives on this within the field.
The customer, generally speaking, is happy to buy the book, right? Because it's a niche product. Digital downloads have yet to have a significant impact on the comic book companies, either favorably or unfavorably. Because at some point, if in fact 1 million people were to download a comic book, that's pretty great to have 1 million people reading your book. Because the comic books, while they may make some money, the characters really make their money in television, in movies, in licensed merchandise, in the lunchbox, and the sheets and everything else. So if 1 million people are reading your comic and love it so much that they're going to go out and buy the toy, it's not so bad.
I think it really does matter. I think it's absolute piracy and theft. And if they ever figure out a way to stamp it, to put their foot down and stop it, that would be great. Because people who do that, they really are scanning in copyrighted works of other people and other creators who have to make a living off selling those items. So every time they scan in a comic book, because they've got nothing else to do with their time, they're actually spiting the writer and the artist who created that comic book, as well as every employee and every retailer across the country.
Another challenge with e-comics is that, to most comic fans, there's nothing like the real thing.
The biggest difference between print comics and e-comics is the comic book fans love to hold the comic book in their hands. They like the paper. They like the feeling of being able to turn back, turn forward, skip, reread. And the biggest challenge for e-comics is that idea that a digital experience can be as satisfying for a comic fan as the print experience.
However, the future holds in store much more for Marvel than digital replications.
When you go to a bookstore in America, you look in the graphic novel section, and more than half of it are Japanese themed or styled manga comics. More than half. Now, that didn't exist 10 years ago, right? You couldn't buy a manga comic in America, 10 years ago. Now you go in any Barnes & Nobles or Borders or Target store and buy them. It's kind of odd.
Aside from the manga front, there is a general goal of Marvel to branch out to the whole world.
One of the greatest things about Marvel is the creativity that they've shown towards internationalizing their characters. What we've got here is Spider-Man India. It was the very first time a superhero had ever been localized to not be the American character that they are in the books that we read here in the States, but to actually be a local character. Right? Wherever you are in the world, Superman is Clark Kent. He works at the Daily Planet. It doesn't matter if you're reading the Czech version, the French version, the Italian version, the Chinese version. He is Clark Kent. What Marvel has done that's really extraordinary is they've allowed creators to localize the characters so that Spider-Man, certainly resembles, our American Spider-Man, but isn't identical.
The internationalization of Marvel Comics is just one part of how Marvel is moving into the future, and there's no telling where the comic industry will be in years to come.
Predicting the future in comics is at least as difficult as predicting the future in any other media. The comic books that fans read today aren't that much different from the books that they read 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And that's not true of anything, right? Television is entirely different. Films are entirely different. Not only that, barring a few changes, the way comics are made today is really similar to the way they were made 50 years ago. Nothing's the same as it was. So comic survival may not depend on its transitioning into visual or digital media. It may be okay for the comic to survive as just a paper storytelling device.
I just think, to me, the Marvel Universe is the best universe out there because it's real and they really try to connect with people and share ideas that, real people in real life can actually, work on and help to make the world a better place.